With Ignite servers looking to be the best time for new or returning players to play Lost Ark, it's about that time for me to review my top 6 characters in my roster as a Lost Ark vet with almost 9,000 hours in the game. Note, these are my top leveled characters, and this will be an in-depth review of the pros and cons of each of them from someone who has spent countless hours piloting them. This isn't a tier list. For that, take a look at my 2 previous class videos. One is the easiest to pilot classes in the game, especially in regards to solo raids and beginners, perfect for those trying out the Ignite servers. The other is a very detailed breakdown of the current meta classes in the game, and I think it's one of the better ones out there for the current meta info and standings. But let's take a look at my main 6 characters. Just a quick note, the Ignite servers will allow you to try up to 6 different classes, leveling them up to endgame raids to allow for testing so you can try out and see what you'd like to play. So testing out what you think you may enjoy is easier than ever in Lost Ark, and with this summer's newest edition of engraving support, switching between specs is free, so you won't have to kit out one and then be screwed if you want to try the other. Keep this in mind as you browse every Lost Ark creators tier list they are putting up this week. To start with, one of the leading choices for many is the Breaker class. This is the newest addition to the game and is currently the meta monster. In Lost Ark, 2 different specs are offered per class, and typically one is specifically better than the other. Not in Breaker's case. Both its crit and specialization specs are top-notch powerhouses. I play the spec variation, Brawl King Storm, or more widely known as BK Breaker. I was one of the few who rolled this variation in March over its Asura counterpart, and since then, its popularity has skyrocketed as more and more highlights of the damage its 2 punches do make the rounds. It also helps that in Tier 4 it remains one of the leading meta monsters with its Arc passives that will be added. This class relies on a spec dominant build, and most of its skills are gauge building skills to fill your meter, but when it does fill, you unleash some of the biggest numbers in the game. This is a relatively easy class to play. The skill is getting your gauge gain skills off without missing or getting pushed out of them, then auto-canceling after you burst to lower cooldowns on your skills so you get back into it ASAP. For more in-depth details on it, check out my video I made of the class back in May. You can tweak a tripod to make it more front-centric, but if you just want to chill, you can technically have it hit from anywhere to get these huge numbers. Most of your damage comes from 2 charging skills, Eye of the Storm and your Identity, and when it's off cooldown, your Awakening does huge damage as well. It's a very fun class if you want some huge numbers, and has a great counter, stagger, and destruction as well to make it all around great. Check out its other spec if this aesthetic appeals to you, as Asura has some super cool abilities that differentiate it and make it super friendly for beginners as well. Personally, I love this class and highly recommend it for any new or returning players who want something special to hook them in. It really only needs 2 big jumps, so kitting it out is also very cheap. Just note, because of how meta it is, there are plenty of them in circulation, so you can typically find many in each pug lobby, so you'll have plenty of competition. Next up is the Soul Eater. Before Breaker, this was the hip new release that did Omega damage. Both specs are super easy to play. Full Moon is a spec variant that unleashes Giga Burst when its gauge fills. Night's Edge is the crit dominant variation that is an uptime class and is constantly unleashing big damage. The numbers aren't as big as Full Moon's, but still big in general as it's constantly hitting with them. This is the spec that I play. Optimally, it follows a set rotation to get the most amount of empowered pink skills before its gauge fully fills, and you go into gas mode, where you just spam everything but Soul Drain. It has a move called Vestige that transports you through the boss. This can be both irritating if you're unused to it or very cool to make plays with. Both specs have very decent movement and mobility. Night's Edge counter is great and has loads of destruction and stagger in its pink skills. One small negative to this class is that for stagger or destruction mechs, you need to be aware of your meter, as when you go into gas form, you have essentially 0 of both for a long downtime until you're out of form. Before Breaker, this was my go-to pick for players to try out, and still one of my top picks for anyone to test out on the Ignite servers. Both specs are great fun and do great damage. In previous videos, I complained that I think I was missing something about the class as my damage was kind of low, but a small tweak to its rotation has it feeling even more smooth. This is one of my favorite classes to play weekly, and from what I hear, its spec variation, once the Arc passive unlocks, does huge damage. Esoteric War Dancer is an oddity in this list. It does big damage, but feels slightly clunky. Don't get me wrong, it feels much better than it previously did rotation-wise, but still in comparison to the others on this list, kind of clunky. War Dancer has 2 specs once again. Its Swift variant, First Intention, has some of the best mobility in the game, and then the spec focus variant, Esso, which is what I play. Esoteric works around building orbs to unleash giga damage. Ideally, you have full 4 orbs before you throw an esoteric move. Your wind bubble builds gauge, so you constantly need to be touching the boss to fill and auto-attacking to compensate for when your other gauge builder is on cooldown. The class has a main rotation focused around a self-crit and self-damage buff that lasts essentially 6 seconds. Without the damage buff, your moves do significantly less damage, so it's sort of a requirement. Although being a crit synergy, the one move that does big damage, Azure Blue Dragon, has a slight crit problem if you aren't stacked with another crit sin, and seeing a white number on it is a horrendous feeling. I've stuck with this character through its worst iterations, so I probably have some sunken cost fallacy with it. I can't tell if it feels really good now or if it just feels better than it did previously. It comes packed with one of the best synergy combos, making it an easy pick in Party Fighter as well. My War Dancer is probably second or third most played characters in my roster, and I'm hoping Tier 4 makes her flourish a lot more. My Slayer has had a resurgence in fun lately. I don't know if it's just because Thamine and Echidna are homework content and Behemoth barely turns, but my ability to perform above average on her as a bad player is becoming increasingly more common. Predator Slayer is the swiftness spec that I play. I've mentioned this countless times, but the class is all about constantly attacking the boss. So much so that part of the class's gimmick is that to stay in form, you have to hit the boss to gain and maintain gauge. This gauge decreases faster and faster as time runs on and gets to the point where it's impossible to maintain, but at this 21 plus stacks range, the downtime when out of form is minimal. But if for some reason you cannot hit the boss or just forget to prior to a sizable amount of stacks, the downtime can be super long and cost you precious damage on the boss. Many find this gimmick highly irritating, especially on bosses whose patterns have them out of the field of combat, thus not allowing them to maintain gauge and them being out of form for a considerable amount of time when the boss does come back. One more factor to this playstyle is all of its attacks are back attack necessary. This is fairly easy on Predator though, as it has many dashes and mobility and fast skills to execute back attacks fairly easily. As of late, mine has been pumping in my static runs. I think something must have clicked in my brain that just makes it work better than previously. The class also excels in stagger and destruction skills. This class has a high floor, but also has a challenging ceiling to hit because of its exhaustion mechanic, making it both a good pick for new players, but also a trap in a sense since its base damage is fine early on, but in reclears, not being able to get much higher than its damage floor is slightly lacking. If you're into high uptime classes with high mobility that rewards you for your skill at maintaining a high uptime, then you will love Predator Slayer. Since my last class list, I've made a drastic change. For some reason, I changed back from Death Strike Sharpshooter to Loyal Companion. This class was just so chill, and that's what I wanted for my 6th character. The issue with this chill playstyle is that it quite literally may have the lowest damage ceiling in the game. Now, to be fair, it probably has the highest damage floor since its bird is constantly auto-attacking, the boss doing 10 plus million damage per hit, forcing a high floor unless for some reason you're facing a wall a mile away from the boss. The bird auto-attacks and Z skill damage do a large portion of the damage paired with the snipe skill, but the damage is considerably lower on LC than its Death Strike counterpart. My Death Strike Sharpshooter at 1600s was doing 160 million plus snipes, whereas my LC Sharpshooter that is 1620 with 40 elixir and 2 pieces full transcendence is hitting around 100 million. Once again, I'm getting that bird damage to compensate, but I don't think it's comparable. Behemoth is my best example of its low damage. The boss is basically a Trixie on dummy. When I tell you that I am fully sitting up and focused trying to do competitive numbers, I can only max out at like 25 million DPS. I legitimately spent 3 hours the other day trying to get into title reclear parties, and I wasn't even annoyed since I knew my class at max was going to do the bare minimum. Now, if you're a new player, it is super chill to pilot and run in raids. Just know in reclear settings or bosses that are glorified pinatas, you won't excel, but the high floor is great for new players. You may be wondering why I switched back to LC. Basically, I got hyped by its T4 upgrade and have copium that it will save me on the super chill alt class. I usually lead with this class as this class is my main and I have the most experience with it. But I think if people saw Berserker on this class list, they would click off. I have played Mayhem since the release of the game. It's had its ups, it's had its downs, and it's currently just okay. If you're an uptime goblin, you can excel with this class, but it does come packed with a huge negative, red dust. This skill gives 33% crit, and most of your rotation is based around getting this off on the boss so that your following rotation will receive the crit buff and the 6% damage increase. If this misses, or you throw it when the boss leaves for a pattern, there goes your rotation for like 15 seconds. It has great mobility because of its Mayhem state, and the small health bar is a deception as it's quite tanky. It also provides great stagger and destruction to the party. I have made jokes that I want to be a BT Zerk, but I didn't want to invest to make that swap. But with Arc passive making it easier to swap with accessories not locking you to a pick, I think I'm only weeks away from harnessing the wicked power of the Berserker's technique. I would tell anyone seeing this that unless you really like this playstyle, opt for maybe Slayer or a better pick, as this class doesn't really stand out in the class landscape currently in Lost Ark. I hope some value was gained from this video. These are my main 6 classes in my roster that I enjoy enough to take in the next season of Lost Ark with me. Some good, some not so much, but they all hold some form of value to me, and I'm excited for each of their futures in this tier. Once again, if you are new and wanting something easy to integrate into the game with, check out my easiest classes to play video, as this lists the top classes to try out on Ignite for ease and integration into the game. If you're looking for pure meta picks though, check out my in-depth overview that goes over the current meta and will definitely give you a powerful idea of something to lock in. Until next time, my name is Easy Break. Take it easy.